The other thing about Trump, he's personally such a kind of moral monster, honestly. It doesn't even occur to him to preface these statements with a sentence or two about the victims. Every normal human being, every normal politician, if you'd say, first I want to say how terrible what was done was. And
even the sociopaths would know that they had to fake it.
You'd think.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Late on Friday, I talked to Stacey Williams, who is, I think, has an interesting story as far as the victims of Trump and Epstein are concerned. She was not part of the child trafficking ring with Epstein, but she dated him when she was in her early 20s briefly, and he took advantage of her in some really creepy ways that we discuss. But during that time, Epstein brought her to Trump Tower, where Trump sexually harassed her. Some of you might have already heard that. We put it out on Bulwark Takes over the weekend. If you're not subscribed to the Bulwark Takes feed, definitely go check that out for more breaking news type stuff. But for the audio only folks, it was a really touching interview. But up first, it's Monday, so we've got editor-at-large of the Bulwark, Bill Kristol. What's going on, Bill?
That was an excellent Stacey Williams discussion, both thought-provoking in terms of how close Epstein and Trump were, how Epstein behaved, as sort of, as you say, she wasn't directly involved in the trafficking ring with Maxwell, but a sense of how that might have gotten going, and also moving really to hear her. I mean, she's someone who came forward at some cost to herself, right? She was like Epstein's girlfriend. I mean, she lays it out in a very straightforward way, and it really, I mean, it's just part of a broader thing. The degree to which the whole thing is repulsive, and the degree of closeness between Trump and Epstein is in the, let's say, in the woman chasing category, and to some degree sliding down into at least Trump's knowledge of the girl exploiting, child raping category. It's more than I realized even a month ago, right? And I sort of followed this stuff a little bit, I mean, there's so many multiple cases where women are now talking about Trump and Epstein being together, joking about it all, to nothing with the birthday card and everything. So.
And I think the two most relevant elements of it are just one, kind of hearing from a victim about what they want, right? And that sometimes gets lost in all this. I think that is important. In her case, talking about the kind of videotapes and wanting to know the truth about that. And the other thing, to your point, is just the corroboration of the Trump and Epstein story is, I think, super important, because essentially the story that Stacey tells is the same as what Maria Farmer told, who reported this to the FBI in 1996. I think, thanks to a commenter, I think I've misstated that there's so many Epstein victims here. Around the same time, there was another underage Epstein victim, and I'd mixed her up with Maria Farmer. Maria Farmer was actually over 18, but even still, she was a victim of Epstein. That, like, literally similar story, like, brought by Trump Tower, they were creepy together, and it was a couple of years later. So it's not like this was like a 1 month friendship or whatever, like a very similar situation between these two victims a couple of years apart. So anyway, stick around for that. Bill, you kind of write this morning about the politics of this. You start by commenting on this Washington Post story this morning. It's getting a lot of attention with the headline, "Trump fumes as Epstein scandal dominates the headlines." You write, "I like the postmodern touch of having a headline about Trump fuming about headlines." That made me chuckle. I kind of hate these stories because, I don't know. Like, it feels like we're in one of these movies where things happen over and over again. You can't, like, we're in Groundhog Day. Like, you can't get out of this. It's like for 10 years. So it's like Trump is mad behind the scenes, and then Trump's people say it's fake news. And it's like, I don't know. These stories annoy me a little bit. But that said, I think you get into kind of why this is relevant from a political standpoint.
Yeah, and I want to say, I was actually going to write more about what Tom Joscelyn and I discussed yesterday, what you discussed with Stacey Williams, the Maria Farmer story. I mean, just the substance of it and how grotesque it is, both the crimes and Trump's proximity to them, and then the cover-up. But I was struck by the Post story, and I thought, maybe it's worth laying out a little bit why I think politically Trump is more vulnerable than he has been in other similar situations, or than he would have been, I think, if they had just decided to stonewall and stuck to it. Honestly, they did have a lot of backlash when they started to stonewall on July 6th, and that rattled them. But they honestly, from their point of view, better off sticking to these things than starting to open the door a bit.
It was a provocative point, just really quick, that I hadn't really thought of. The actually continuing to stonewall and just listening to Trump again, Trump does, for all the horrible traits he has, he's better political instincts than most of the consultant class and the people around him. And had they all sung from the hymn book that he did of like, right, it's over, we got to move on, let's talk about Obama, that they would be in better shape today. It's true.
I think so. I mean, bonding the AG and the Department of Justice and the FBI have decided to do this. I support that decision. It's over, and we need to move on. Yeah, there would have been grumbling, and people would have said, "Oh, we betrayed us," and some people might have
and
stated
he was still getting made fun of on the South Park and the Bro podcast and stuff. But like the advancing of the story would have potentially stopped.
Yeah, and that's the key, I think, here, that when you get into a situation, they put out the video on the 6th, the prison video, just to have something to put out, I suppose. That turned out to have a 3-minute gap. Then they decided, oof, we're getting beat up. Well, we'll request the grand jury transcripts, which is nonsense, really, from a substantive point of view of what you're going to learn. And the judges aren't going to release them anyway. But that's like a gimmicky thing. But it sort of raises the question, well, if they want to release that stuff, maybe there should be some other stuff they could release. Their own accounts that they're telling the media of how they did the search is that maybe only 10% of the 1,000 pages or 10,000 pages, whatever they are, should be released once you do all the redactions. Still quite a lot of pages. Why aren't those being released? And then obviously the trip to Maxwell. And okay, he's now finding new information. And then the tweet, I guess Blanche's tweet, Deputy Attorney General's social media post at the end about how, stay tuned, more information to come, something like that. I mean, that's just, the key to a stone wall is to preserve the wall. The key to a cover up is to drop the curtain on end the play. Not
that we're giving advice on how to do a cover.
No, but I'm just saying,
if we were,
right. Whereas sort of teasing what's coming next just makes people interested out of some people, I think, for desire for justice and for accountability and for transparency, and also just kind of like what's happening next. I mean, what's next state? What's Act 4? That was interesting in Act 3. So I think the Maxwell visit, the wife thought about it. Maybe they'll get the fake Maxwell statement that Trump wasn't involved. Maybe they'll get her pointing at other people. Maybe they'll do the deal. But the degree to which it sort of opened the door to kind of what's next and invites the media to look much more at what's coming next and what's coming and invites people who are unhappy from within the government, career people, presumably FBI or DOJ, to sort of say, you know what, this thing is terrible. And we're going to point out that there is stuff in the files, like the birthday card. And I don't know. I feel like, I maybe I'm being a little wishful thinking. Maybe they'll now shut the door fine. Maybe this is after Act 4. They succeed and they all cover up and the curtain drops. But I do think they, again, more than a little oxygen to the story. And now we've got a recess. And don't you think Republicans in Congress seem rattled? Democrats seem a little energized.
I want to talk about the August recess. Just one more thing, though, on the Maxwell meeting, because Andrew Weissman and I covered this.
Yeah, that was a good discussion too. Yeah.
And I think he was really good on kind of the legal side of this. But it was after we taped that the Maxwell lawyer came out and said explicitly, which what we all assumed implicitly, was that they want a pardon out of this or a commutation. I don't know. I mean, they were teasing that there's maybe 100 names she could provide. What do you think about all of that? Just in the meta, and then you have Mike Johnson over the weekend saying, not only do I not think she needs a pardon, I think she should be in jail for longer than 20 years, a rare agreement I have with Mike Johnson. How do you think all of that kind of stuff nets out? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's bad for Trump. I mean, I think calling much more attention to Maxwell, who'd been a little bit relegated to the sort of sidekick of Epstein in a lot of the early coverage, if people haven't followed it very closely. And I, again, would say I was a little bit in that category. Now you have women talking about what a monster she was. Yeah. She was really key to the whole enterprise.
She's awful. And she's also in the room. Some people that haven't paid attention that close to this, they even just think she was like the one that like organized when the girls come over, which is bad enough. I mean, she's in the room for some of the molestation, like some of the. I mean, she is a really dark, depraved character.
And there's Trump's deputy attorney general, also his personal defense lawyer, cordially yucking it up, apparently, with Maxwell's lawyer, whom he also knows, and Maxwell. And I think no one else in the room, I've not gotten entire clarity. Do we have any reporting that there was any FBI agent or someone taking notes of this conversation, or was it just...
That's what Andrew was talking about. And at this point, we do not. But it doesn't mean that wasn't happening, but we don't right now.
So I think they've opened the door to everyone to come forward and tell truthfully what a monster she was, how monstrous the whole enterprise with Epstein. Let's go back to that again. She can say, well, she invited Trump, or Epstein invited Trump. She and Epstein invited Trump as one of 20 friends to contribute the birthday card. It is what it is. Of course, both Epstein and Trump have said many times what close friends they are. They can't really pretend Trump wasn't hanging around with Epstein for those 15 years. And here's one point. I think this comes out implicitly in your conversation, but Joscelyn made this point well, I thought, in our little thing yesterday. I mean, of course, Epstein knew a lot of people. He had parties, he had dinner parties. He played golf with people. He was a big shot. But there are people who therefore didn't know, maybe didn't want to know honestly what he was really like, or maybe honestly just didn't know anything. They invited to a party at Epstein's. There were other famous, distinguished people there. They went to a dinner party.
That is true. I would just add one thing. There were some people that were doing this in like 2018, 10 years after he'd been arrested. But anyway.
Totally agree. And even 2011 and after the 2008 plea bargain and slap on the wrist, the degree to which a lot of the stuff continues and revives, right? Isn't the whole Virgin Island thing post 2008. I mean,
not the whole thing, but some of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of it. I mean, it's terrible. Anyway, so I don't want to give any excuse to any of these people.
Yeah.
Having said that, Trump is not even plausibly in anything like that category of slightly unknowing golf buddy or business partner or, Wall Street associate or some such thing. He is cheek by jowl, so to speak, with Epstein, chasing women. I mean, that's just explicit and public. Yeah. Now, obviously, the underage question is open. We don't know. Maybe Trump was careful on that side, but again, the degree of proximity and the kinds of things they were doing together for 15 years. I mean, I just think that's sunk in a way that I'm not sure it had. What do you think? Did it before the whole thing broke out? I mean, maybe did people know that? I don't know how much there was.
It's interesting. This is one of those things where it's hard for me to separate because I thought everybody did. I don't know. I got an email from a reporter or a text from a reporter yesterday that he was sending me a pitch I'd sent him back from my anti-Trump PR days from 2016 or maybe even 2015. It was 9 or 10 years ago about the Trump and Epstein relationship. And he sends it to me and he's like, time is a flat circle. He's like, I was going through my old inbox and like, here's a pitch from you 10 years ago. So I knew, but I think that like, people that paid a close attention to this knew, but I think now we're at a different level. I think it's safe to say now, as far as people's awareness.
Can you say it's to your credit that you pitched it? It's also interesting that you had to pitch it because that, in a way, doesn't that suggest that not everyone? I mean, that you felt you had to pitch it meant it wasn't front and center in the news.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point. It's always nice to have a bottle of wine around the house, but if you're like me, if you're not a huge wine drinker, sometimes you don't have the time or the thought to run down to the store and have a couple bottles around the house. Well, our sponsor has a solution for that. It's Naked Wines. This podcast is sponsored by Naked Wines. Naked is a wine club that directly connects you to the world's best independent winemakers, so you can get a world-class wine delivered straight to your door. Use our code THEBULWARK for the code and password at nakedwines.com and get 6 bottles for just $39.99. How do they do it? They bring you amazing wine straight from the winery at up to 60% less than you would pay in store. By cutting out extra costs like middleman markups, winemakers can pass those savings on to you without skimping on quality. I just like having the diversity of options, different kinds of grapes, with the Naked Wines. Have a rosé, have a dry white, have a little fruitier white, have a couple reds sitting around. It's just nice to have stuff around the house. You don't know who's going to stop by. I don't know how things are in your neck of the woods, New Orleans. People are stopping by the house from time to time, and you want to give them something to drink. And so Naked Wines is a nice solution to ensure we're always loaded up with different varietals, different types. It's been a sponsor I've been happy to avail myself of. Now is the time to join the Naked Wines community. Head to nakedwines.com/thebulwark, click enter voucher, and put in my code, THEBULWARK, for both the code and password for 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99 with shipping included. That's $100 off your first 6 bottles at nakedwines.com/thebulwark and use the code and password THEBULWARK for 6 bottles of wine for $39.99. He's talking right now. He's always talking. But as we're taping this, and so on Epstein, I had a couple of things I want to get to from earlier in this press conference, but just right now, a couple of comments. it's a hoax. It's been built up way beyond proportion. The files were run by the worst scum on earth, Comey, Garland, Biden, and all the people that actually led the government, including the auto pen. The whole thing is a hoax. And then he goes on, I never went to Epstein's island. I never had the privilege of going to his island. That appears to be a direct quote. I haven't actually heard that, but I'm just getting this as it's coming across. Our guy, Jared, producer Jared, we should shout him out. He had a viral tweet over the weekend that was like, Trump has more pictures with Epstein than most people do with their grandparents. Kind of macabre, but did well. I don't know. I just don't know how, again, you can kind of tell that he doesn't think this is a big deal. I mean, like, beyond the cover-up part of it, right? Like, isn't there like something that betrays, right? Like, you can't, if the strategy is, we're going to get whoever, I'm not going to name random people's names, but like, we're going to get these other Democrats who are in these files and we're going to focus on them with a deal with Maxwell. That runs counter to the idea that it's a hoax, right? And it's hard to imagine that Trump's selling that. You can tell where Trump's heart is. Trump's heart is like, this guy was kind of playing a little grab ass and boys will be boys and it's not that big of a deal. And I never went to the island, so don't look at me on the kid stuff, but it seemed like a great island. Like that to me seems like where his heart is on this. And so it's hard to execute the other part of the plan when you're doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, just 2 points on that. I mean, so Blanche, the more I think about it, and prompted by what you just said, Blanche's comment, or Maxwell's lawyer's comment, I guess uncontradicted by Blanche, that they went over 100 names, Blanche spending 8 hours, 10 hours with Maxwell. That's bad for them. That is to say, they shouldn't want other names. I know they're tempted to go with Clinton and all this stuff and Democrats. The right way to do this, if you were doing the cover-up, not that you and I would be giving advice, but luckily they've already not done this, so it doesn't matter. Blanche should have gone, said, look, I spoke with Maxwell very briefly. She's a liar and a convicted sex offender. But I felt I had due diligence. There's been a bit of an uproar. I satisfied myself that she knows, I asked her what she knows and she wasn't forthcoming. There seems to be no more from her than there was already in the files. Case closed. They did the opposite. 100 names. I think this thing can be kept alive until we see 100 names. And incidentally, that's very problematic. They can't all literally be Democrats. That would be kind of crazy, right? And isn't there one of their main talking points, not a talking point I like much, I think you've been critical of it too, all these innocent people just get mentioned. It's hearsay. What was the phrase that they used in the meeting? Apparently Bondi told the president it was not hearsay allegations, hearsay rumors. No, that was a different word. Anyway, it was just hearsay, nothing. Yeah. That's a better place for them to sit. We're not going to deal in hearsay. I don't trust Maxwell. It's closed. You could have maybe used the Maxwell meeting as a way to reclose the door, so to speak, having opened it. Instead, he's now opened it wide. He's at odds with Trump in a sense, who's saying it's just a hoax. There's nothing there. That's a little untenable, I believe. I mean, they were conviction. Maxwell and Epstein were convicted. Epstein pled to serious crimes.
Yeah, right.
The other thing about Trump, he's such a kind of moral monster, honestly. It doesn't even occur to him to preface these statements with a sentence or two about the victims. Every normal human being, every normal politician would say, first, I want to say how terrible what was done was. And
even the sociopaths would know that they had to fake it.
You'd think.
Like Trump is so far gone past
he is. I think that maybe is, he really is, isn't he? I mean, there's not even a pretense of having any concern for these people. So what is the administration? Well, his press conference is happening as we're speaking, so I haven't thought about that part. But what is their line now? The files are a hoax, or they're worth pursuing. Maxwell didn't do anything, or she's got 100 names of people that the Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, has to track down. They really, I think I'm going to just say my little morning shots thing is this would add to the list of, continuing the drama, so to speak. It's sort of like, there's another mystery. It's like watching a mystery. I was watching a British mystery last night, TV on BritBox and stuff. It's sort of like another development. How does that fit in, right? You don't want, if you're running a cover-up, to be kind of continually intriguing people with new developments.
Yeah, just one more on just kind of this contrast between Trump, which again, I want to repeat what he said. It's a hoax that has been built up way beyond proportion. So that's where his stance is. Dan Bongino, the deputy FBI director, who has been, like one of the leading people talking about the need to uncover who all the pedophiles are in the Epstein files, back when he was a competitor in the podcast space, is now at the Bureau. And he put out this statement. He doesn't mention Epstein per se in this statement, but I want to read it just because the contrast in tone between hoax built up beyond proportion and where Banino is pretty stark. The director, Cash, and I are committed to stamping out public corruption and the political weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. It's a priority for us. But what I've learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters has shocked me down to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. We're going to conduct investigations by the book. We're going to get the answers we all deserve, all caps. As with any investigation, I cannot predict where it will land, but we'll get the truth. I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. It shocked me to the core. It could all be bluster, but again, this is the deputy FBI director. It's not like some random spokesperson. So maybe he's not talking about Epstein. Maybe he's trying to obliquely allude to Obama or some other thing. Who the hell knows? But this puts him in the same boat. Like, you can't say, oh, let's move on from whatever this is. It's like if you've seen things that are so shocking, you'll never be the same, that there's got to be a payoff at some point, right?
I mean, I sort of assumed when I read that he thinks he's referring to Obama and Russia and, the Tulsi Gabbard stuff and all this. He's never seen such corruption by the deep state.
But why not just say that?
Yeah, why not say it? And he leaves it ambiguous. And this line about these files are totally corrupted, and it's who knows what Brennan and I don't know, Comey and everyone put in them. I mean, that's asking for trouble also, because there are a lot of people at the FBI who, whatever their personal views about politics and so forth, probably don't like the idea that they just sat around being part of that they went through these files, or back in the day, they were involved in investigations that are totally fake and hoax and politically driven. I mean, the FBI did actually investigate, Epstein and then Maxwell and indicted both of them. Justice Department indicted both of them. And people don't. So he's now picking a fight with, sort of hundreds of agents and
yeah. He's supposed to that Banino's supposed to manage. A lot of agents are being run out. And I don't know. David Frum did a good podcast with Peter Strzok I'd recommend from last week. And I spoke to Mike Feinberg about this. I think that the under the surface, amount of people bailing on the FBI over this, I don't know that it's really sunk in with people. Like they're really losing folks at a pretty serious rate. I was talking to somebody else who does kind of crime research about this yesterday. Anyway, on the Democrats, just really quick, on Epstein, I didn't plan to do another 25 minutes on Epstein, but until Alex Acosta comes on this podcast, we're going to have no choice but to do that. Lauren Egan writes about the plans for this long recess and whether this is a usable issue. I don't know. What do you think about this? I think at some level, this is like more of a getting people disillusioned with Republicans issue than it is something that the Democrats can really effectively rally around, but maybe that's wrong. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I've been I can argue that one either way. I was saying to another friend last week, Democrats have been a little lame on this, and he said, I don't know, maybe it's better if they just stay out of it, honestly. I mean, if you have impartial reporters and people just and women like Stacey Williams speaking up, isn't that better than making it just a normal,
and regular people going to town halls, to talk to pressure Republicans about this is better. I will say the Democrats had been. It's funny to watch the progression. I had Chris Murphy on last Tuesday, and he's pretty good on this, but you can kind of tell that he hadn't thought that deeply about all of the various layers and talking points, and Murphy's out there on a million issues. He's really good on the crypto thing. Right? It's just natural, right? And then I watched him talk about it again Thursday or Friday, and he'd ratcheted up the rhetoric. And part of that is because of the news that had come out during the week, right? But moving it into full cover-up mode, and you do see that a little bit from Democrats. But maybe that's not. But maybe you're right. Maybe that's not even the most useful thing.
I don't know how important it is that Ro Khanna and Tom Massey are on TV together, but it's not nothing. And Khanna's are pretty shrewd about this stuff sometimes, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I think the key is for the Democrats not to go around giving pompous speeches as Democratic members of Congress or as Democratic challengers, but letting citizens speak up. You know what I mean? They need to get behind the scenes. The Associated super PACs and so forth have to get people to go to these meetings if there are Republican town halls, or if not, go to Democratic town halls. But let's have people in the audience speak up, not the members of Congress.
Yeah, I agree with that. While we're doing the Democrats, I was going to save this to the end, but let's just dispense with what Democrats' political challenge is right now. So there's a Wall Street Journal poll over the weekend that had, I think Morning Shots described it as the Democrats in shambles. 33% approving of the party, 63% disapproving, their worst showing since 1990. Back in your day, that's really your heyday right there.
Of course, I was on the Republican side, so I was happy about it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You were driving them down. It was so effective. Kristol's machinations behind the scene.
It was so effective that Bill Clinton won the presidency in 2 years later, which probably tells you something about these kinds of polls. But anyway, yeah,
a great point. Yeah, CNN had a poll that showed Dems, despite being very upset with their party, having way more enthusiasm at this point to vote in the midterms, which makes sense. That I just think what we're learning basically from these polls is that Dem voters just don't think that the party is up for what they need to be up for when it comes to Trump. Independent voters still feel like Democrats are a little bit out of touch, and yet they're also very excited to get to have a check on Donald Trump at some level, so it might not actually matter, at least in the short term politically. I don't know. What do you make of that?
Totally agree. Some of that dissatisfaction with the party comes from Democrats who are dissatisfied that the party's not being more aggressive. They're not going to vote for Trump Republicans, however. So, and they're probably going to vote to check Trump. I think they have what this shows is Democrats. I don't know that they have a big 2026 problem. They may have other problems, but I don't think this shows a 2026 problem. That'll be a referendum on Trump. They have a 2028 challenge, let's say. They're not a party that's really in great shape, that happened to lose one election and just ready to roar to the presidency. They need good candidates, and they need to generally have something of an overhaul by 27, 28.
Kind of related to this, so there are two Senate announcements over the weekend. Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, former governor, Democrat, is going to run for that Senate seat. It looks like against the chairman of the RNC, Michael Whatley. It sounds like Larry Trump took a pass on that race, which is unfortunate for content's sake, if not for the country. Dan Osborne was the independent that ran in Nebraska against Deb Fischer. Did pretty well. I kind of had forgotten how close it was, so I pulled it up this morning. Deb Fischer was at 53, and Dan Osborne at 46 in a Trump election year, and in a 2024 general election instead of in a midterm election. So I think that augurs that that's at least possible as a seat for it. Now he would be an independent to pick up. So I don't know what both of those guys are kind of not in the traditional mold for Democrats. I mean, Roy Cooper's kind of in an old school traditional mold of a Southern Democrat that doesn't really exist anymore. But what do you think about those announcements?
I mean, I worry. I like Cooper, and I just worry that there's quite a lot of history of these ex-governors turning around to run for the Senate. They genuinely were popular governors. They have to run for the Senate. It's a federal race. It's who you're going to vote for majority leader. Do you agree with the most radical member of the Democratic conference in the Senate? And suddenly these popular governors lose, right? That happened in Tennessee, didn't it, a few years ago? And other states, we've seen it happen sort of. So I worry about that. But look, he should be a strong candidate. And he knows Medicaid extremely well. He expanded it in North Carolina. And so that if that's going to be a big issue in 2026, he could really discuss it intelligently.
Yeah,
it's hard to tell how much loyalty there is to him down there, but I think some. Yeah, I think Osborne's good. They just need to have a lot of different candidates. I think Cooper cuts against this because he's unusually popular and skilled, I think, as a politician. Generally, I prefer to see, non-politicians or non-career politicians or people with different backgrounds. I'm just going to put it that way, running. But I think that you could have a wave. I mean, that's CNN. Begala and I run some. Paul Begala and I run something this past week, and he made the point that
you forgot a little what you were
Paul
on
Begala and I, Democrat, run.
I thought you said you run something with Paul Begala.
Oh no, so we're on.
What are you guys doing?
We were on. Yeah, I do. Yeah, that would be interesting. No, I was on something with him. Sorry, and he said he thought that intensity number mattered. He thought that in other cycles that's really shown something. If Democratic voters want to vote 20 points more or care a lot about it by 20-point margin over Republican voters, that probably translates into something in an off-year election.
Yeah, just one quick thing on both guys. The Cooper video, this is kind of a silly thing, but when somebody is obviously being recruited into the race that maybe doesn't want this job, a senator, that's another thing you've seen in these governors races. People feel like they have to get in and they're not that excited. Just figure skating judging his opening video. He looked like a person that had energy and was excited for the race. And whether that's true, I don't know. I haven't talked to Roy Cooper, but you can sniff it sometimes. I've seen some introduction videos of, I don't know, my mind goes to Fred Thompson's presidential race where it's like, this person doesn't seem like their heart is in it. And I didn't get that from Cooper, so that's good. On Osborne, I just pulled this up. So Trump won Nebraska by 20 and Fisher beat Osborne by 7. So he ran 13 points, on net ahead of the party. That's not nothing, that is very real. And you've seen on some of the stuff, you've seen these things where, candidates like in Senate races in particular end up kind of falling back to the mean. You saw this like Larry Hogan and so you think that they'll be better. And then it turns out that they kind of run just very slightly better than a generic Republican or Democrat. That wasn't the case for him. So I think that's notable. I'm going to try to get him on the pod. I think that's a very interesting race for everybody to monitor. Going back to some actual policy stuff from Trump over the weekend and this morning, we have a EU tariff deal, if you want to call it that. There's a European economist I follow who described it this way: what was unthinkable a year ago is now the new baseline. I think that's important to say. A lot of the mainstream coverage of this, it's like, oh, they got a deal and it's 15%. It's only 15% tariff. That there's some with carve outs, of course, for some things of Trump buddies and semiconductor equipment, a couple other things. I do think that there's been a little bit of a frog boiling in water on all this sort of stuff. Like, had you gone to people in October and been like, we're going to have a 15% across the board tariff on Europe, I think everybody would be like, that's crazy. That's far more than anything that we've had in recent times. And yet, because of how like radical Trump's initial proposals were, and because of because the market has been relatively resilient, more than relatively resilient, really, people are just becoming a little sanguine about it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think the markets think he'll keep by cutting deals, and these tariffs will be lower than they look like they're going to be because they'll be carve-outs, and maybe that's right. Look, we're a huge economy. Trade's only 12, 13% or something like that of GDP. We can, swallow some of this and take it, so to speak. I guess a couple of points though. Stan Voiger, our friend, the AEI economist, pointed out to me, we were talking about this Thursday, Friday. I was sort of saying, well, shouldn't the tariffs be having more of an effect? He said, they are having a considerable effect. And look, I think we'll get Wednesday, second quarter GDP numbers, preliminary numbers on Wednesday. So that will be interesting. First quarter was mildly, slightly negative. Second quarter, they think maybe 2 point something. So that would average out to 1.5, let's just say. We were growing 3% when Biden left. And that was the prognosis for 2025. People didn't think it was going to slow. So I think we are, 1 percentage point isn't, the Great Depression. It's not dramatic. It's a big difference though, if you go 2% to 3% in the real world. So that's, I don't know. I mean, I kind of assume we end up paying more of a price for this than the markets now think, but obviously I could easily be wrong. The other point is, aren't prices, prices are going up on some items though, a little more than mainstream world, and somehow the world is, given that Biden paid such a huge price for 7, 8, 9% inflation in 2022. I believe Chris Truax has this little piece. I think we'll have in Morning Shots tomorrow. I think beef prices are up more than 9%, and hamburger, steak, and all this just in the last 6 months under Trump's presidency. One reason for that, I believe, is that some insanely high percentage of the ground meat in the U.S. is imported from Brazil. It turns out, I was not aware of this. And we have big tariffs on Brazil because he doesn't like the fact that Bolsonaro is being tried. Right. So I don't know. We're paying more for hamburgers and steak because Trump has this, loves his fellow autocrat there in Brazil who tried to steal an election and is being tried according to the laws of Brazil. I feel like some of that stuff has more potential oomph than people realize.
Potential. Yeah, and it's narrow. And the across the board kind of shock of the 8% or whatever it was and during 2022, right. I think was like real because people are just getting hit all over the place in their life, versus this is like certain products. I don't know. I don't know how many people are ordering sweaters from Europe, but one of my buddies did forward me an email about a shocking tariff price that he received. And I do think, do people actually vote on that or change their vote just because they ordered one thing and they're like, oh fuck, I had to pay $40 on this that I didn't realize I had to pay, something that I was ordering online. But maybe, I don't know. We're not really seeing it at this point, but that is annoying if it starts to happen a lot, I guess. Maybe one of those things you're like, whatever. But if it starts to happen frequently, I do think that it could have an impact.
That's funny. I heard a similar story about that. Someone who, I guess if you order online, it's not like you buy something at a store and the store has already paid the tariff and marked up your item. So you can notice that your sweater's more expensive at whatever store you're going to, but you don't literally pay the tariff yourself. Whereas I guess you do online. It's just, it says, an extra, in this case, it was like an extra $75 for the tariff for something from Canada. So yeah, that could add up a little bit, don't you? I think.
God willing. What the hell do I know? I'm just a podcast host. One more thing. I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the issues in Gaza and the hunger and the pictures that we've been seeing from there that are pretty striking tomorrow with our guest who wrote about this recently. But I just want to briefly, this is another just massive issue for Trump. And in a weird way, kind of in a way that's a little awkward to talk about, frankly, it kind of intersects somewhat with the Epstein story, because there is this populist right and left kind of anti-Israel that sometimes bleeds into anti-Semitism feeling. And that is part of the Epstein controversy for some people. And then some of them are very upset about what's happening in Israel. I mean, we talk about how the bro podcasters are mad at him about the Epstein thing. Most of those guys have spoken out on Gaza as well too, right? So in a way that's a little bit uncomfortable, there is a kind of an overlap between the stories, and Trump is not in a good place in this. So here's Trump this morning on this. There's so much to talk about with this quote. He begins with a JD Vance comment about what is happening to the people in Gaza. We gave Gaza 60 million. Nobody even said thank you. Somebody should have said thank you. And then there's a follow-up question from a reporter. Netanyahu said there's no starvation in Gaza. Do you agree with that assessment? Trump, I don't know. I mean, based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry. A lot to talk about there, but I don't know. What do you make of all that?
I mean, it's a good example. I don't know what to make of it. He's, again, we'll see what he does. If he does do anything, it's been unclear what the administration thinks and what the administration's policy is. Trump's watching TV. I guess he doesn't have access to any intelligence reports about what's really happening there. Or he doesn't have access to actual proposals of what we could and couldn't do, what we could do with other international agencies. This is one reason you sort of want to be, I would say, just from a political point of view, leaving aside what's happening in Gaza, what really, really could and should be done, which I think is slightly complicated, but I think it's bad. I'm just say that, and Israel has not behaved well in this circumstance, but and has some real responsibility and accountability. But we have not. I mean, Biden got beat up from all sides, right? He pulled Israel back at times. The pro-Israel people didn't like him. He let Israel do things at times. Obviously, the pro-Palestinian people were annoyed at him. But so you could say he picked up the best of both worlds. Maybe Trump's smart to just kind of keep it weirdly at a distance. But on the other hand, one reason you want to be part of international organizations is you are doing things in consort with other nations. And you can say, look, we've all decided that we're going to get this stuff in this way, this food in this way. We're working very closely with all of our partners. And it does, whereas Trump is Mr., it's all about America. We just do whatever we want on our own. We hate all these international organizations. We pulled out of half of them. For all I know, I don't know, are we still in some of the food organizations and we're not in the health organization, I don't think. So it's sort of, okay, are you doing anything or not? Now, I suppose from an America First point of view, not our problem, right? Starvation happens in the world. It's a tough world out there. It happens in Africa. It happens in Gaza. And we're not in the business of being humanitarian, goody-goodies. But that's hard to sustain, I think, for an American president, even an alleged America First president. And so, I don't know quite where it goes for him. Yeah. But the watching TV is a pretty astonishing line, right? I mean, he's also in the UK. Well, he's in Scotland, but he's was in the UK. That's part of the UK, I guess. Last I looked, barely.
We're going to get in trouble with some Britain firsters.
Yeah, but Starmer's going to have to raise it at the meeting. Maybe they haven't. I think they haven't quite met yet. At the meeting today, And it's more of an issue there. Honestly, they've had big demonstrations and stuff. So again, I think it's sort of the watching TV. It's really unbelievable in a way. I hadn't focused on that till you mentioned it. U.S. president.
It's just like it's idiocracy. Like he's getting his news from cable TV. He's like an old man that's just watching his stories on TV and reacting, rather than like a president who has real accountability and responsibility here, especially given how he's tied himself to Netanyahu. I mean, it is one of those things like they had the option. So again, to your point about from the American first perspective, and I think a decent number of people that voted for Trump thought this was what was going to happen. Maybe that was wrong-headed, but like Trump's kind of weird, Jello like sort of policy like pronouncements on the Middle East like made like the pro-Israel people feel like he was on their side, and like the right populists that want us to leave the region thought he was on their side. So I guess kudos to him for that political maneuver. But the people that there's a decent chunk of people that voted for him that thought that Trump was just going to kind of be like Homer Simpson going back into the bushes on the Middle East and just kind of like, you all do whatever you want. I don't, that's not really our game. I'll do economic deals with the, Sharia oil oligarchs in Saudi and the guys that are giving me free planes and stuff. But like, that's it. I mean, that's not what he's done. I mean, he's gotten very, he's worked very closely with Israel on various things. And so now just to be like, well, I'm watching TV, it doesn't really work as a whole policy wise. All right. Well, the one positive, maybe Trump development. I want to close on something positive. How's that? Does that sound nice?
No, it's bad. That's bad. But go ahead. Yeah,
it's bad. Russia. So Trump again. It's positive both in the sense that Trump is being humiliated in this press conference with regards to his past comments on Putin. So that's positive, and it's positive in that he seems to be slightly continuing to move his policy slowly but surely. He said this: Putin goes out and starts launching rockets into some city like Kyiv and kills a lot of people in nursing homes or whatever. I'm disappointed in Putin. I'm going to reduce that 50 days that I gave him to a lesser number. I'm going to make a new deadline of 10 or 12 days from today, about 2 weeks. We just don't see any progress being made. Any green shoot there for you, Bill Kristol?
I mean, it's better for the world and for the country and for Ukraine that Trump is ambivalent or uncertain about Putin than if he's 100% with him. I mean, just as a practical matter, it increases perhaps the chances of more aid for Ukraine, maybe for the sanctions bill, which I still notice hasn't been passed, and Trump still doesn't seem to quite be for, even though they keep talking about it. So, on the other hand, I mean, look, the best, he's going to be president for 3.5 years. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for the country and bad for the world. The best we can hope for, honestly, is inconstancy, lack of really throwing in with the bad guys and sort of only being with the bad guys 1/3 or 1/2 of the time, and sometimes fearing against the bad guys because he gets annoyed at them, and being sort of for the good guys, and mostly not really doing as much damage as he might otherwise do. I guess we just have to, we do have to hope for that. It's for the sake of people around the world, obviously. It's a weird thing, I've got to say, psychologically. I've never had this experience with an American president. I mean, there have been presidents I disagreed with a lot, Obama's foreign policy at different times and stuff. But then you sort of, okay, I hope he changes his policy, or I hope Congress pressures him to change his policy, or I hope reality shows him that this policy was terrible, or minimally we can all agree that, I don't know, not enforcing the red line was terrible and the next president won't do it. You sort of have a way of handling a president you disagree with. Here, one ends up rooting for a kind of less bad outcomes over the next 3.5 years. And so I hope we act so that fewer people starve in Gaza, and I hope we act in ways that increase the chances of peace. But I don't know. It's hard.
On the other hand, you'd like him to utterly fail. Yeah, I can give you Catholic dispensation. I can on this. Doesn't matter what you're rooting for.
Well,
so right.
No, and I'm not really. And also, just one last point, though, just analytically. I mean, the other thing is just it doesn't matter what I'm saying, but I mean, in this case,
it matters what you're saying, but it doesn't matter what you're rooting.
No, it doesn't matter what my psychology
you being unhappy that Donald Trump is doing something good is not. It does not matter actually to the grand scheme of things. So you can embrace
I'm not
that.
Entirely unhappy, mostly unhappy even. But I would say, but just in terms of like thinking about it, in the first term, in the first term of Trump, one could think, okay, I hope Mattis prevails on this. I hope Pompeo, I don't love, but whatever. I hope he prevails on that. Now you don't even have that, right? It is it's a weird thing to follow, but it does, the more he's got a bunch of ridiculous sycophants working for him, the more it's all on him. I do think that's true. Like on this one, maybe you would take the position of, you know what, this is very complicated. The administration is working on it. Our guy who's got the lead on this is, I don't know, Rubio or some deputy secretary of state or some National Security Council number 3 guy. It doesn't have to be the number 1 guy, but someone, right? And that gives you a little deflection. It's all on Trump because it's all in his head, right?
Yeah. Hey, well, the one thing that just comes to mind, I'm trying to get I have an America First kind of foreign policy guest in mind. I want to kind of hash out a few things with, because they're a little disappointed with Trump in various ways. It does betray just how bankrupt and how hard to execute that is. Like, it sounds nice, like we're only going to care about ourselves, but just like listening to Trump tie himself into knots on the Middle East and on Russia, I don't know. We can maybe take some solace in that being revealed to be a very shallow ideology that's hard to execute. All right, Bill Kristol, that was wonderful. Everybody else, you can come on back tomorrow. We got a great guest coming up. We'll see y'all then. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Tim.